Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending upon where in the world you are, and welcome back to Afternoons with ACES, the implementation series. I am Thomas Simkis. Across from me is Lee Briggs. We are your hosts for this little session. As you can see on the title, this is session 2 of 10 planned sessions using reports to drive requirements and design. The goal of this series is to share tips and tricks and best practices that Lee and I have obtained over almost 50 years combined consulting experience. Agenda for today. We're going to go through introductions. We're going to do a series overview, what we plan to accomplish in these 10 sessions. Then we're going to talk about reports and how important they can be in driving your system and functional design, how they can drive your structure, and how you can use them to show institutional knowledge. And that is not from the consulting side, that is from the customer side. Why do people use specific tools or reports or dashboards to complete their jobs? Why do they use Excel dumps or static reports? And how they can be transitioned into something more usable from the system. We're talking about the standard report listing from Oracle and why that's important. And then finally, we're going to talk about documenting all of your reporting requirements. With that, we'll go into introductions. My name is Thomas Simkis. I've been an Oracle implementation consultant since 1998. I've held various jobs along that time frame, mostly in the consulting industry. I did have a stint at a straight job at the ASCPA all the way back in the early aughts, but for the most part, I've been a consultant. I've been a COO, a CFO, a practice director. I've also been a senior vice president of Oracle Cloud Revenue, so I certainly do have a lot of experience working with the Oracle applications and in industry. I got my Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Business Administration from Ursinus College all the way back in 1995. I got my Juris Doctorate, which is a fancy way of saying I got a law degree from the James A. Beasley School of Law of Temple University way back in 2002. I'm an Oracle Applications ACE professional. Been an ACE since 2014. One of the main reasons that Lee and I do these series, aside from the fact is we do love to interact with users and share our knowledge. It does help us keep our ACE credentials. I was an OATUG Star Presenter of the Year in 2017. I'm a certified public accountant in the state of Pennsylvania, and I am a retired member of the PA, New Jersey, and American Bar Association. Lee?
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Lee Briggs. I have worked with the Oracle application since 2001. I started with EBS version 11, release 11, as it was back in the day. And since 2001 to about 2013, I was focused on EBS, but that's all we had at the time. Since 2013, I've been working exclusively with Oracle Cloud applications, Fusion applications, whatever we're calling them. I was part of the first financials and HR implementation in America. I was on the team that we did the first implementation of financials, projects, supply chain, and HR in the world. So it was some cool background there. I've done about 50, 60 implementations of cloud, probably a similar number of EBS. So certainly seen my way around the systems. Both as an implementation consultant, so actually hands-on keyboard, training, designing systems, being brought in to troubleshoot and start doing rescue projects. So I've seen a gamut of implementations. My degree is in accounting and finance. I got that from the University of Leicester in 1996. Got my master's in management studies from Northampton in 97. I too am an ACE. We lovingly refer to me as the first ACE between Tom and I. I got mine in 2013. And I was also OATUG Star Presenter of the Year. I was the inaugural recipient of that award back in 2014. So this series, as Tom said, it is the implementation series. We're focusing on the tips and tricks and best practices that we've learned over 50-odd years of doing implementations. I'm not going to go through all of these sessions. We did start our session, the last one, was an overview, really looking at how we define success on any implementation. Today's session, as Tom mentioned, is using reports to drive requirements. And the session that we have coming up next is actually turning those requirements into test cases. As you can see, we've got another 7 sessions after this, but today's session is around using reports to drive requirements. So Tom, often a lot of places will start with requirements, but we've tried to start with having reports drive the design, drive those requirements. Tell us a little bit about what you think about that.
Sure, Lee. So, excuse me. Uh, when I'm an ERP guy, and when I do an ERP implementation, whether it's general ledger or payables, I generally start with what information do you need to get out of the system, whether it's for an audit or financial statements or your compliance dashboards, your compliance reports. What data you need to produce really will help drive what information you put into the system and how you put it in. I always like to say when I'm designing my chart of accounts, if you need a financial statement by it, whatever it is, it needs to be in your chart of accounts. And I do feel strongly about that. So having an understanding about where you need to get data and how it needs to be produced does help drive your design. Not only from a chart of account standpoint, but also from your HR structures, your legal structures, and of course your organizations. So, if you need to report 1099s by a legal entity, if you need customer sales by region, all those things don't necessarily have to be in your chart, but you got to capture them somewhere. And we'll get to this in a few slides, but what reports people use and how they use them also shows me how well they know their organization, and how well they understand what they need to get out of the system.
Okay, so we mentioned financial reports driving design there. What I've grabbed for these screens is essentially income statements. For the folks who are looking at implementing cloud, we actually get some canned income statements out of the box. If you're doing your job correctly, you'll get these out of the box. And this starts looking at the kind of reports we can see out there. There's 5 reports that I'm showing here. They're all income statements looking at different things, consolidating them by whatever, showing them consolidated as we go through, rolling reports, whether we want to see bar charts on there, whether we want to see line graphs on there, whether we want to see trends out there. It's these kind of reports you're looking at give you a feel for what they are. On each of these reports, as we look at them, the numbers should be the same for the same period. But you're looking at this to start saying, okay, I can see that my accounting for each of these revenues always means the same thing. Expenses always means the same thing. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe I want to see something else. As I look on the 2 that we have, the 5 that we have out there, I can see the rolling quarterly income statement, the one that is very front, only lists 2 things under revenues. On the one that's slightly behind it, it just says income statement USD. I can see revenues is made up by 4 different things. Maybe those accounts are falling somewhere else, maybe they're not. But this is the kind of thing I start looking at. Again, it's financials reports. I need a report by it. This is my revenue, whatever I needed it by. This is the kind of thing I want to start seeing. How do I break these up? Because it starts giving me an idea when I'm architecting this of, okay, there's a couple of different flavors of what revenues mean. I'm already thinking maybe that's a different hierarchy. It helps lead me someplace as we go through here. To Tom's point, and every time he says it in every meeting, and as a client, you're hearing it for the first time, and it's golden. Every time you hear it, you know it's coming. If you need to report on it, whatever it is, it needs to be in your chart of accounts. Whether it is, to Tom's point, he said region, I need sales by region. Okay, is that something in my chart? Is that something in AR? Well, I'm capturing my store's location in my chart. Great, maybe I can use location to roll up there, something like that. But it starts giving you some ideas of what we're looking for. And in fact, the next slide we start going through, this is the kind of thing it starts driving. I've got an idea of what I have a leading part of where my chart looks like. We all know that in cloud, even in EBS, I have to have 3 segments in my chart of accounts. And this is ERP for the HR folks, sorry. In the ERP, I have to have a bare minimum of 3 segments, right? I have to have something we're calling a balancing segment, which is going to give me a trial balance, it's going to give me a balance sheet, but the journal has to balance by whatever we call that segment, whether it is company, whether it is fund, whether it is entity, whatever I call it, has to balance. I have to have a cost center segment. That's one of the ones that our HR folks will actually share with us. Typically, a cost center segment relates to something in HR. It should relate to something that owns people as well. We have to have natural accounts, so cash, revenue, expense, whatever it is. I have to have those 3. but I can look at building my other segments in my chart based on what those reports needed. You need a report by location, great. An income statement by location? Okay, location probably has to be in my chart somewhere. It leads me down to including it in my structure somewhere, coming up with a segment for it. Okay, you've said you need locations. What am I looking at here? Is it alpha? Is it alpha? Is it numeric? Can it be alphanumeric if I'm doing parents and child? And then I need some values out there. So just looking at one of those reports has started to at least get me thinking as an architect, this is the kind of structure I'm looking for. And just because I've got structure and instance here, they don't have to be the same thing. You can have a structure to say this is generally what my charts, plural, are going to look like around the world, but specifically in my US instance of that chart, this is what it's going to be. I'm going to have my company, my cost center, my natural account. I've got all those out there, but I'm building the rest of my structure to allow for my instance to mean something else. Segment 4 in the US means location. In segment 4 in Europe means something else, means country, something like that. It's actually called something else, but the structure is the same. Tom, that's what I kind of use that stuff for. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I do. I'm going to specifically talk about chart of accounts, and it really is something that I see quite often. I like to get a legacy financial statement from my consultants or from my clients that I can tie to a new map financial statement, but clients so often have difficulty mapping a new chart of accounts to an old chart of accounts. But at the very least, what you can do is you can map at the level that Oracle does when it generates your financial statement from a system. So as Lee said, if you do your job right, you should get those nifty financial statements right from the Oracle applications. And because of the level that they're defined at, which is just revenue and expenses, it's pretty easy to at least do that mapping back to your legacy chart and trial balance. And you can make sure that your trial balance, at least at that hierarchy level, foots. I cannot tell you how often I get through these things and nobody looks at the reports and they're live and they've loaded data and they got to do massive amounts of reclasses after they're live. Using reports appropriately in the cycle helps prevent that. So reports show institutional knowledge. What do I mean by that? What reports do we use? Okay, so whether you're talking to your financials person, your HCM person, whomever it happens to be, they should have a listing when they come to your report design session. What do they use? And I will tell you a really important question is how often do they use them? I will tell you again, on many implementations that Lee and I have done, we've been asked to replicate reports, and we start to dig in. We see that that report hasn't actually been run in years, but somebody asked for it. What reports do we use? What reports do we generate? Why do we generate them, and who uses them? Are they statutory? How often are they generated? And why are these things important? We'll hit on this later on in the deck, but you don't want to necessarily focus on creation of a report that is used at year end when you're going live in January, and year end isn't until December. We lovingly call those things day 2 items, and it does seem like it's a consulting answer to put work off, but it really does allow you, the consultant, and you, the customer, to prioritize your reports if you can figure out who uses them and when they're generated. Do we need to replicate those reports? Usually the answer should be no. You really don't want to replicate what you had in your old system. I do understand the need for certain statutory reports, and the way that you run your business doesn't necessarily have to change overnight when you go live on an ERP system, but it should change. And so looking at reports and the reports that are in the system and what Oracle comes with is super important. And then the loving one, do you have to have that exact report? An exercise that I go through quite frequently is, somebody has 35 or 40 columns on a single report, and the data is so onerous to look at and maintain. I always ask the question, do you really have to have all those fields at the same time? And usually the answer is, if it doesn't exist in Oracle, is of course we do. But if you can get the same information from 2 reports, is that viable? And if the answer is no, could you at least look at combining those 2 reports so that you're not looking to build things from scratch, right? So they show institutional knowledge. How well do you know your system, Mr. Customer? They also help you, the consultant, show how well you know the system, and how well reports can support what goals your customer may have. And do not accept, we've always done it that way. I love this cartoon, I've loved this for years. We don't want to learn a new thing, we're too busy. I see this not only on new implementations, I see it on clients that are using Oracle. I see it quite frequently for reasons that still astound me. The amount of customers that I have that I've implemented that still do a data dump and get the reports from Excel astounds me. Even though you can do it from SmartView, even though you could do it from FRS, which is going to be called Reports soon, the unwillingness or inability to use those tools on a repeatable basis it just astounds me. You really have to challenge that as an implementation consultant. You got to challenge that idea of why you have to do it that way. And it doesn't mean that the customer might not have a good reason, but you really want to make sure you get that reason before you just acquiesce. All right, so, or docs.oracle.com. This is probably one of my favorite places to go. All the reports are listed. They're listed in an Excel sheet. If you go into the documentation for some of the applications, there's an image of the report. There's an image of the parameters and how you should run it. This is as good of a place to get information as there is. You've also got, of course, Oracle Customer Connect. If you're not familiar with that, the end users, Customer Connect is a place where customers go and they can share reports, share information. But docs.oracle.com, it has a listing of all your reports. I try to have my clients go through all of the reports as part of my onboarding. We're not always successful at it. Some people have the ability and the capability and the willingness to do it more than others, but you as a systems integration consultant really should know about this website. You should point your customers to it. And as an exercise when you're doing your reports mapping, I will use this as my tool to go through and do my reports mapping. So, document, document, document. What does that mean? Once you have a library of your reports documented, some customers will include a listing of all the reports. The name of a report is not particularly helpful. It's usually pretty difficult to ascertain what's on it just by a name. But you certainly should have the names of the reports so you can have a master repository of what is needed. And that gets to the second point. If it's no longer needed, make sure you document why it's not needed. It's going to be replaced by this new thing, or it's just not needed. But you really want to have that clean audit trail of what they had, what they're getting, and how those two crossflow. If it is needed, when is it needed? And this gets back to one of the points that we made a few minutes ago. Is it needed day one? Is it needed by the end of the first period close, first quarter close, at year end? If it's needed on a specific date, what is that? Make sure you understand that. And have a good way of tracking it and utilizing that. These implementations are complicated. We all use different tools, whether it's a Jira or a SharePoint or some other issue tracking system. But whatever tool you use, it really is important that you have your reports documented and you understand how your reports are going to be driven by your decisions. The last thing I will say on that is, and this really goes to historical reporting, I do have a lot of customers that want to convert an ostentatious amount of history. We as consultants usually say, oh, we'll just put it in a warehouse and you'll be fine. And that's a fine statement, but it does ignore the fact that at some point the customer may have a need to report off of historical data with current data. And it may not be for a day one, it may be a day two item as we talked about earlier, but having strategy for how you can unify that data is super important, and it doesn't necessarily drive ERP design decisions, but it certainly should drive how you configure and access your data warehouse. So that's our session on reporting and how it should drive your design. So really, what do we talk about? Reports. They do drive design, they drive your structure. That goes across ERP, HCM, procurement, project accounting. Understand what reports are needed, how they're needed, how they have to be run. That should be the very first thing you as an implementer should do so that you can make appropriate design recommendations to your customer. Excel is a great tool for that, by the way. You can mock things up and show them how they're going to work. If people don't have imaginations, the next good tool is standard report listing. Running that and showing what is available to personnel, showing them that listing and what fields can be used is extremely helpful in mapping your legacy reports to your new Oracle reports. And then obviously, lastly, document all your report requirements, what's needed, what's not needed, if it's going away, how's it going away, and why. Would you like to know more? If so, you can always follow myself or Lee on X. Our handles are up there. Of course, you can follow us on LinkedIn as well. We do take those questions and we do respond. And of course, if you have found this video, you have navigated somehow to our YouTube channel. If you found it by accident, we are at Afternoons with Aces. That is the same handle we have with Twitter, by the way. X, excuse me, I keep calling it Twitter. That is all we have for today. If you would like to know more, follow us, and we will see you for the next session of the implementation series. Everybody have a great day.